Hi guys, and thank you so much for joining me. If you are new here, I'm Kat and I like to talk about true crime, conspiracies and all sorts of related things. I know I'm orange. Don't even get me started. I hate foundations and picking them, honestly. That's all I'm gonna say. But anyway, before we get started with today's video, I have a tiny challenge for you. So, you know that I'm from Romania. Our alphabet is much different than the English alphabet, for example, as in we have some extra letters in it, right? And so I just wanted to see if you are able to pronounce a few words in Romanian. Because I speak English, so I want to challenge you to try and pronounce a few words in Romanian using the extra letters from the alphabet. So are you up for it? It's just gonna take a few seconds. So naturally the first word that came into my mind is something that I usually use. So the letter is T. Țigară. You try it now. Did you do it? Țigară. T. If you did it, well done. You just said cigarette. So that's the word for today and the letter for today. T. Thanks guys! Now you learned a word in Romanian. Okay, let's get on with today's video. Thank you for accepting my rambling today, and hopefully you did well in the challenge. I feel like I'm presenting a competition show here. Never mind, let's carry on. A 5-year inquiry published on 30th of March 2022 reveals 201 babies and 9 mothers died needlessly during a 20-year period of appalling care at the Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital NHS Trust. This is the biggest maternity scandal in the UK history, and quite honestly guys, it's shocking. That's the reason I started this video with a little challenge, just so I kind of change your mood a bit before we get into the morbid details of this story. Donna Ockenden, the senior midwife behind the Ockenden review into almost 1600 incidents, ruled that the organization failed to investigate, failed to learn, and failed to improve, and this resulted in tragedies and life-changing incidents for so many families. Tragedies which could have been avoided. So, before we get started, I actually read the full 208 pages review, which is available on the Gov.uk website. I will leave a link in the description down below if you are interested in reading it in full, but today I want to focus more on the victims who came forward, because I truly think that their stories need to be heard. I will give you a bit of an overview into the report, but my main focus will be on the victims and families impacted by the wrongdoings of this hospital trust. Before we get started though, a trigger warning for you guys. I will be discussing death of newborns, and if this is something that you feel triggered by, then please step away now and I will see you in the next video. Also, all the information that I'm giving you in today's video is already found in the public domain. This video is for educational purposes only, and I also don't mean any disrespect to anyone I talk about in the video. Thank you. Let's have a look at how the Shrewsbury maternity scandal unfolded. In 2002, a Parliament report highlights how Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital Trust, SATH, has one of the lowest cesarean rates in the country, at just 10% of births. In 2007, a leading number of maternity organizations signed a normal birth consensus statement discouraging medical interventions like C-sections where possible. At this time, then health regulator, the Healthcare Commission, warns Shrewsbury Hospital Trust that there were issues in how staff were monitoring fetal heart rates after incidents where babies were injured. In 2009, Kate Stanton Davies dies just hours after being born while under the care of Shrewsbury staff. Her parents begin to campaign for an investigation into what went wrong. In 2013, Shrewsbury Maternity Services faced an internal investigation, but it concluded it was safe and of good quality. In 2015, an inquiry into failings at Morecambe Bay NHS Trust, where 11 babies and one mother suffered avoidable deaths, found a group of midwives' overzealous pursuit of natural childbirth had led at times to inappropriate and unsafe care. It said the entire NHS should learn from the failings observed. In 2016, Pippa Griffiths dies shortly after being born while being cared for by Shrewsbury staff. Her parents joined forces with Kate Stanton Davies' mother and father in calling for an investigation into maternity services at the trust. In 2017, then Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt orders an inquiry into the trust, which will eventually be headed by midwife Donna Ockenden. The original scope of the inquiry encompasses just 23 cases. In 2018, former Health Secretary Matt Hancock said the Ockenden review is being expanded to include hundreds of cases. Also, in this year, the trust is rated inadequate for safety by health watchdog the Care Quality Commission, CQC. In 2020, Donna Ockenden announces the investigation is now looking at cases involving 1,862 families and releases early recommendations ahead of the full report. In 2021, the inquiry findings are delayed to 22nd of March 2022 due to an influx of new information from Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital Trust. The final report was originally due in December 2021. In the wake of the biggest ever maternity scandal to affect the National Health Service, police are now investigating 600 cases at Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital NHS Trust. Mothers were being blamed for their own deaths and their poor outcomes. Babies suffered skull fractures, broken bones, or developed cerebral palsy after traumatic forceps deliveries, while others were starved of oxygen or experienced life-changing brain injuries. In one case, cleaners threw away vital information which was stored on post-it notes, causing tragic consequences for a newborn and her family. Donna Ockenden, the senior midwife behind the probe into almost 1,600 incidents, ruled that the organization failed to investigate, failed to learn, and failed to improve. She also revealed families were still coming forward with examples of poor care suffered at the hands of the trust as recently as 2021, with one case dating back to the 1970s. Staff were found to be frightened to speak out about errors because of the culture of undermining and bullying, while bosses ignored parents who raised concerns about how they were treated. There were issues with staffing, the management of patient safety, patient and family involvement in care and investigations, as well as the complaints process. Doctors discouraged C-sections as part of a drive to push up natural birth rates, which resulted in many babies dying during birth or shortly after. External health authorities failed to sufficiently investigate serious incidents with families denied access to reviews of their care. Ex-Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt, who was the one who ordered the probe in 2017 to examine just 23 cases of poor care, said that the scale of the failures shown in the report was beyond his darkest fears. He said a natural birth ideology pressured mothers to avoid C-sections even when that might have been the safer option. Sajid Javid, currently in charge of the Department of Health, called the findings of the Ockenden report tragic and harrowing, with poor care turning what should have been moments of joy and happiness for families into unimaginable trauma. He told MPs that a number of staff involved in the scandal have already been suspended or struck off, and that around 600 cases are actively being investigated by police under an investigation named Operation Lincoln. He also said the individuals responsible for the serious and repeated failures will be held to account. West Mercia Police, the police force carrying out the investigation, confirmed no arrests have yet been made, but they would examine if a criminal case could be brought against either the trust or the individuals involved. Trust Chief Executive Louise Barnett apologized for the pain the affected families went through, but another parent, Kaylee Griffiths, said the organization's words aren't going to be enough. Prime Minister Boris Johnson told the House of Commons, "Every woman giving birth has the right to a safe birth, and my heart therefore goes out to the families for the distress and suffering they have endured." Rhiannon Davies gave birth in a midwife-led unit run by Shrewsbury Trust, which had no doctors. The midwives encouraged her and her husband, Richard Stanton, to go to the unit to keep the numbers up. Her pregnancy was wrongly classified as being low risk, and she should have given birth at a hospital where doctors could be on hand. Kate Stanton Davies was born pale and floppy and died just a few hours after birth. Rhiannon suffered complications in the last month of her pregnancy due to a rare condition, which means blood leaks from the fetus and into the mother. At just over 6 hours of age, Kate died in my arms, Mr. Stanton said. "I think for me, the overriding memory I have of that day is Rhiannon arriving at the neonatal unit and hearing her cries. Rhiannon knew, I think in her heart, that Kate had already died." Rhiannon treasures a picture of her cradling newborn Kate. "I just look at my beautiful girl and I miss her," she said. "There were so many mistakes made during my pregnancy, during my labor, during the early hours of her life. So many mistakes. Kate's death was entirely avoidable. That's the point." An independent review by NHS England following complaints by the Davies family found that the original probe into Kate's death was poor and had multiple inaccuracies. The campaign by Kate's mother, together with Mrs. Griffiths, whose daughter Pippa also died as a result of inadequate care in 2016, led to Jeremy Hunt ordering the independent inquiry. The inquiry found Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital NHS Trust presided over catastrophic failures for 20 years and didn't learn from its own investigations, which led to babies being stillborn, dying shortly after birth, or being left severely brain damaged. It breaks my heart, honestly, for all these families, and honestly it's so hard to tell this story. Several mothers died after failings in care, while others were forced to have natural births despite the fact they should have been offered C-sections. A total of 29 incidents where babies suffered brain injuries were found, as well as 65 cases where poor care resulted in cerebral palsy. The report examined cases involving 1,486 families, mostly covering 2000 to 2019, and reviewed 1,592 clinical incidents. There were repeated errors in care which led to injury to either mothers or their babies. A review of 498 stillbirths found that 1 in 4 had significant or major concerns over the maternity care given, which, if managed appropriately, might or would have resulted in a different outcome. There were also major concerns in the care given to mothers in 2/3 of cases where the baby was deprived of oxygen during birth. Almost 1/3 of deaths within the first 7 days of life had significant or major concerns over care which might have resulted in a different outcome. Staff were overly confident in their ability to manage complex pregnancies or where abnormalities were noted in pregnancy, and they were reluctant to involve more senior staff. The competition of them and us between midwives and obstetricians meant that some midwives were scared to involve consultants. In one example of shocking failure, critical information regarding a patient was written on post-it notes which cleaners then swept into the bin. The report also detailed how mothers themselves were frequently blamed for their own deaths. In one incident in 2011, a husband was told his wife's death had been due to her size. It was difficult for the midwives to listen to the baby's heartbeat due to her size, he was told. In another case from 2002, hospital documentation into the death of a mother noted she must have been responsible for some of that because she clearly did not complain very much and tended to ignore many of her symptoms. Donna Ockenden said, "What is astounding is that for more than 2 decades, these issues have not been challenged internally and the trust was not held to account by external bodies." Families were still coming forward with concerns over Shrewsbury Maternity Service in 2021, even as the trust was under severe pressure to improve. Maternity care failures had been identified as far back as the 1970s, with one family coming forward with a case from 1973. Some midwives had already been struck off or sanctioned by the professional regulator, the Nursing and Midwifery Council, NMC. One of these was Claire Roberts, who was involved in the care of Pippa Griffiths. She was struck off the NMC's register just a few weeks ago. The trust has already paid out more than £58 million in clinical negligence damages and costs since 2000. Detective Chief Superintendent Damien Barrett of West Mercia Police said the investigation into the deaths at Shrewsbury was ongoing. "We have been liaising closely with the Ockenden review and are of course aware of the release of the report today," he said. "Our investigation, named Operation Lincoln, was launched in 2017 to explore whether there is evidence to support a criminal case against the trust or any individuals involved. This investigation remains ongoing and very much active. This is a highly complex and very sensitive investigation that has required us to speak to a large number of people to gather as much information as we can. Officers are consulting with medical specialists as part of the investigation, but no one has been charged as yet." One of the mothers taking legal action against Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust is the Reverend Charlotte Cheshire, 44 years old, from Newport, Shropshire. Her son, Adam, looked unwell after his birth in 2011, but her concerns were dismissed by staff at the trust. After it was finally discovered that Adam had Group B strep infection, he spent almost a month in intensive care. Now 11 years old, he has been left with multiple health problems. Reverend Cheshire also added she was aware some might describe her as lucky as her son lived when so many others did not. But honestly, it changed her life forever. And it also changed Adam's life forever. He is hearing impaired, visually impaired, and has violent, challenging behavior. Even though he is 11, mentally he's around 4 years old. When he's happy, when he's calm, he's just a delight and he's wonderful. But when he's overwhelmed, he's aggressive. Julie Rawlings, whose daughter Olivia died after 23 hours of labor following a consultant's use of forceps, said that she wanted someone from the trust to talk to her face to face about her case. That was never done. They apologized through the media, they apologized to all the families through the media, but they've never sat down with the families. With the report's publication, Julie feels that her daughter finally has a voice. Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital NHS Trust is not alone in having its maternity services scrutinised, with reports expected from both Nottingham and East Kent. An independent review of maternity incidents, complaints and concerns is currently underway at Nottingham University Hospital. The review, looking at data from 2006, when the trust was formed, until mid-October 2021, has been initiated for a lot of reasons, but mainly due to families raising concerns about their cases. It's expected to be completed by November 2022. Meanwhile, an independent review into maternity and neonatal services at East Kent Hospitals University NHS Foundation Trust in the period since 2009 is also underway. The review, which aims to complete its terms of reference by autumn 2022, is taking place following concerns raised about the quality and outcomes of maternity and neonatal care. Last year, East Kent Hospitals University NHS Foundation Trust was fined £733,000 over serious failures that led to the death of baby Harry Richford. At the inquest into Harry's death in January 2020, Coroner Christopher Sutton Mattox listed a series of errors he found with the care given. Harry Richford was born on 2nd of November 2017 at the Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother Hospital in Margate, Kent. He died 7 days later. A series of catastrophic failures during labor and after his birth led to him being so severely brain damaged that his family was advised to switch off his life support. Despite resistance from the hospital, Harry's parents, Tom and Sarah Richford, and his grandparents pushed for a coroner's inquiry into how the actions of the doctors and midwives resulted in Harry being so badly harmed. The hospital consistently refused to inform the coroner, and it was only after the Richfords contacted him directly that Harry's death was notified. The coroner's conclusion was that Harry's death was because of neglect and was completely avoidable. On 9th of October 2020, the Care Quality Commission announced it would be criminally prosecuting the trust on 2 counts of unsafe care and treatment, one for Sarah and one for Harry. This is the first prosecution of its kind for unsafe clinical care. Pippa Griffiths could still be alive today if midwives from Shropshire Hospital would have realized that she had a deadly infection. Pippa was born at home in Shropshire in April 2016 but died just 31 hours later from a Group B Streptococcus infection. A coroner ruled her death was avoidable and blamed a string of unforgivable errors by midwives. Medical staff missed a crucial opportunity to save Pippa when her mother, Kaylee, rang a midwife with concerns about her baby's feeding. A second chance to save Pippa's life was missed when her mother rang hours later to report bloody mucus, a sign of a serious bacterial infection which could have been treated with urgent medical treatment. Pippa was born at 8:34 a.m. and the midwife was supposed to have gone to the family's home for a checkup later in the afternoon, but she failed to turn up. Pippa developed a purple rash later that night and eventually she stopped breathing. Emergency services managed to get her breathing again, but she later sadly passed away. The trust accepted that chances to save Pippa's life were missed. Following the conclusion of the inquest, Mrs. Griffiths said, "We fought for her and fought for the truth, and ultimately she could have been saved." Charlotte Jackson raised concerns with staff that she lost fluid and her baby's movement had reduced when she was 37 weeks pregnant. Workers told her she likely just wet herself, but her son, Jacob Harris, was stillborn in November 2018 at Telford Hospital. The then 29-year-old from Bridgnorth got lawyers involved and the hospital trust admitted liability and agreed a settlement. She told the Shropshire Star, "I was quite worried and upset. Jacob had always been a very active baby, so when I noticed that his movements were reduced, I had a gut feeling that something was not right. However, I was shocked when I was told that it was a one-off and I'd probably wet the bed. Charlotte later said that giving birth to Jacob was absolutely horrific. She was heartbroken to know her baby had already died and she had to deliver a baby which she would never be able to hold and nurture and watch grow. Reverend Charlotte Cheshire, 44 years old, from Newport, Shropshire, said that her son Adam, 11 years old now, looked unwell after his birth in 2011, but her concerns were dismissed by staff at the trust. When it was finally discovered that he had Group B Strep infection, he was rushed to intensive care where he stayed for almost a month. Charlotte, who is suing the trust, said her son has been left with multiple severe health problems and should have received treatment much earlier. Jack Stephen Byrne died 11 hours after being trapped in the birth canal for 4 minutes. His mother, Hayley Matthews, was told nothing was wrong with her pregnancy, but later found out Jack was distressed for 20 minutes before delivery. He also contracted Group B Streptococcus, the lethal infection carried by 1 in 5 women. Jack died in March 2015 at the Princess Royal Hospital in Telford, hours after another baby, Oliver Smale, died following similar complications. Oliver's death was later deemed avoidable. Even though Jack's death was not deemed avoidable, it was later considered part of the investigation. Hayley Matthews from Cherbury, West Shropshire, previously said, "We would have both been in the hospital at the same time, and there are so many parallels between the two cases. As with this poor boy, Jack got his shoulder stuck during delivery. They just left his head hanging while they went off to get someone to do something about it." A post-mortem examination revealed that Jack was starved of oxygen and had an infection on the lung and pneumonia caused by Strep B. Hayley is campaigning for routine screening of Strep B, which is not NHS policy, saying that if she would have been tested for Strep B during her pregnancy, they might have picked up on it and given her antibiotics at an earlier stage, and this would mean Jack would be alive today. Kate Stanton Davis died 6 hours after she was born because midwives failed to spot the signs of her declining health. Her mother, Rhiannon Davis, raised fears over reduced movement in the womb, but was ignored by midwives who failed to properly monitor her pregnancy and wrongly deemed it low risk. Kate, who had anemia, was born pale and floppy at Ludlow Community Hospital in Shropshire in March 2009. She was airlifted to Birmingham's Heartlands Hospital, but sadly she passed away. A report published in February 2016 concluded her death was avoidable and identified a series of failings and poor record-keeping at the Shrewsbury and Telford Trust. 2 midwives were deemed responsible for the errors, which included changing Kate's observation notes after her death. Kate Wilkins' baby girl died at Shrewsbury Hospital after midwives left her in a side room for 48 hours and failed to properly monitor her. Katie was 15 days overdue when she arrived at the hospital to be induced in February 2013. There were no beds available on the labor ward, and 24-year-old Kate was forgotten in the room for 2 days and visited by staff just a few times. When a midwife came to check on her progress, they realized her baby's heartbeat couldn't be found. Maddie was delivered stillborn in the early hours of the following day. Hospital bosses later admitted the baby would have been born alive if she had been treated sooner. Maddie was delivered stillborn in the early hours of February 2021. The results of a post-mortem examination said the baby girl's death was unexplained. In a letter to Miss Wilkins, Katie Smith, head of midwifery at the hospital, apologized and admitted, had your induction occurred more timely, Madison would likely to have been born alive. She added that practices at the hospital had now changed. Steph Hotchkiss from Telford started to suffer severe pains in September 2014 when she was nearly 31 weeks pregnant and asked if she was having an abruption. Staff told her she wasn't, but they were wrong, and baby Sophia passed away just 32 hours later. Steph told the Shropshire Star she still suffers flashbacks of the trauma caused by a ruptured placenta.
I remember saying, how do I say goodbye, when I've only just said hello? Sorry. And then we walked down. They took Sophia out of the incubator. And yeah, they asked us, like, they were telling us that she wasn't going to make it. And so I said, it's time, it's fine, just let her go. It was horrible. I felt like if I'd have not let her go, it was selfish of me, because she was clearly in pain.
The then 28-year-old had similar issues with her son Kyan, who was born in 2013, and then she had an emergency C-section. But she said staff refused to listen to her during her daughter's birth, with her having told Royal Shrewsbury Hospital staff what she thought was happening. Steph said it was really frustrating not to be listened to when she previously had a difficult pregnancy involving a similar issue. Kamaljit Upal was on the way to having her third child in 2003, but was told it would have to be delivered by C-section because of how he was lying. But staff at the Royal Shrewsbury Hospital encouraged her to give birth naturally, and she went through 18 hours of labor. Baby Manpreet Upal got stuck and Kamaljit had to have an emergency C-section. Then Kamaljit was just coming out of her general anesthetic when a member of staff just told her he died. And that was all. They then placed the baby in her arms and told her to say goodbye. She didn't know how to say goodbye to her baby, so she just gave him a kiss, and when she came around a bit more, they just put her in a ward where she could see even more babies. Baby Manpreet Upal should be 19 years old today. Instead, his mother, Kamaljit, still keeps the unworn baby clothing she bought for him. He died 2 hours after he was born. Mrs. Upal clearly recalls the day she went into hospital in labor. First thing I said in the doorway was, I'd like to have a C-section, she said. I prefer a C-section because the baby's breech, and the doctor turned around and said to me, no, you're alright, just carry on delivering. And then he got stuck. One doctor pushed him while the other doctor pulled him, and that's how they brought him back out by doing a C-section eventually. But sadly, it was too late. He came out very floppy. That's it. I was never told anything in detail until I saw my records. Months later, there was a devastating meeting with a consultant. He said that he took the wrong option of delivering, she said. He even gave me a time that if he'd been delivered in the early hours at 3:45, the baby would have lived a normal life. He turned around and blatantly said that if I were you to get over this pregnancy, get pregnant again and you will get over this. There was no remorse. Debbie Greenway lost one of her twin babies during labor at the trust. Consultants came and went, there was no communication, she didn't know what drugs she was being given or even why. One consultant was trying to take a fetal blood sample from baby John, where they basically cut his head to find his oxygen level, but they never explained what they were doing. Debbie actually believed that the babies were being delivered. At the start of her pregnancy, a C-section delivery was brushed off straight away. She was being told the trust has the lowest cesarean rate in the country and they were proud of it, and they couldn't see a reason why she couldn't have a natural birth. Debbie eventually had an emergency C-section, but when she woke up, her husband handed her baby Daniel. And Debbie asked where baby John was, and then another doctor she'd never seen before said there was nothing they could do. They need to turn the life support off, and before Debbie could even react to the news, The doctor walked off and came back carrying baby John. As Debbie was just coming around, she thought that baby John was fine. She believed he was alive. Following a post-mortem, she said, all of the time frame was between me going in with 2 healthy babies with absolutely no issues and an awful long time from when he was brain damaged to delivery. Katie Anson's son, Kai, died after just 4 days of life due to failures at the trust. The baby was starved of oxygen in birth at Princess Royal Hospital, Telford in 2015, but a coroner later heard he may have lived if staff had acted differently. 39-year-old Katie and her partner, 34-year-old Matthew Hall from Telford, were unable to have another child due to unexplained infertility. Kai died at New Cross Hospital in Wolverhampton. A 2016 inquest heard that some heart rate recordings of the unborn baby had not been taken. Shrewsbury coroner John Ellery said his death could have been prevented. The couple struggled to get pregnant for 2 years before Kai. They have just had their 6th failed attempt at IVF. At least 4 bosses at Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital walked into lucrative jobs following the maternity scandal. All of these tragedies, and they still get to be the winners in this. How fair is that? 54-year-old Simon Wright left his £160,000 chief executive role in 2019 and was hired by a US healthcare firm, handed millions in government contracts. 3 other senior staff at the NHS hospital, including its former head of midwifery and director of nursing, were redeployed to other roles within the health service. Simon Wright was hired as a continuous improvement consultant by the Seattle-based Virginia Mason Institute, awarded a £12.5 million contract by ministers in 2015. Under the 5-year scheme, the US hospital was asked to drive up standards at 5 trusts, including Shrewsbury and Telford. The trust's former head of midwifery, Katie Smith, also landed a role at Shrewsbury, which involves liaising with the hospital in Seattle. She was criticized for having a defensive attitude and being unwilling to learn from mistakes made by the trust. But despite receiving a final written warning, she was given the new job by the hospital. Shrewsbury's former director of nursing, Deirdre Fowler, who was paid up to £125,000 a year, left in 2019 to join Bedford Hospital's NHS Trust as Director of Nursing and Patient Services. And Shrewsbury and Telford's Medical Director, Edwin Borman, who claimed in 2017 that baby death rates were no worse than anywhere else when they were up to 46% higher in some categories, he took up a new role at the trust, overseeing improvements to clinical practice. Shrewsbury's maternity services were first investigated in 2013 but found to be safe and of good quality. Shropshire Clinical Commissioning Group, CCG, and Telford and Wrekin ordered the internal review following concerns over an increased incidence of serial clinical adverse events. It covered the period from 1st of April 2012 to March 31st the following year, 2013, including the period when an inquest ruled the death of baby Kate Stanton Davis could have been avoided. The report was completed by Dr. Josh Dixie, then a secondary care consultant at Shropshire CCG. He concluded that the trust had a maternity service to be proud of and that the service is safe and effective. The report added, there is a robust approach to risk management, clinical governance structures and learning from incidents, which suggests a learning organization. It also referred to the trust's high level of normal deliveries and lower than average rates of C-section, but described this as a positive. At the unit, it noted the philosophy of care at the midwife-led unit was based on the view that pregnancy and birth were normal processes. Many more babies died at the Trust maternity unit after the report was completed. Donna Ockenden said staff had spoken of a republic of maternity which disliked corporate oversight, while others spoke of chaos and being ignored by more senior staff. She said they describe a culture on the labor ward at the Trust of undermining and bullying. Confirming that concerns had been expressed by staff within the past month, she said, "We spoke to staff members of the Trust and documentary evidence also considered by the review team showed us that following serious incidents there would be no follow-up from recommendations made." One staff member told us this wasn't just the maternity unit in chaos and under pressure, this was a whole organization where it was difficult to find an area which was not under pressure. Another member of staff told us there was a republic of maternity, but often the maternity service seemed to consume its own smoke and didn't like having oversight by the corporate team. Donna Ockenden said that her team was still very concerned that in recent weeks staff still working at the Trust have come forward to express their concerns about the Trust in the here and now. Staff reported feeling fearful to speak out and were told not to take part in the inquiry. One staff member speaking to the review team said, "I know multiple people that have not approached you to speak because of fear, because of how it was put in that briefing from the Trust to staff. There were people that had every intention of completing their survey and then after that, no way." I was like, but this is your chance to speak. How can you make any changes? How can you do anything about it when we are given this opportunity, but they are still working there? I think they were perhaps fearful of their jobs. I don't know. Donna Ockenden said families have continued to contact the inquiry in 2020 and 2021 with concerns about maternity care with similar failings seen in older cases. She added that this is a cause for grave concern. A whistleblower who worked at the hospital trust says there was a climate of fear among staff who tried to report concerns. Bernie Bentic was a consultant obstetrician at the Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust for almost 30 years. He said, "In Shrewsbury and Telford there was a climate of fear where staff felt unable to speak up because of risk of victimization. Clearly, when a baby or a mother dies, it's extremely traumatic for everybody concerned. Sadly, the mechanisms for trying to prevent recurrence weren't sufficient for a number of factors. Resources and the institutionalized bullying and blame culture was a large part of that." Mr. Bentic worked at the Trust until 2020. He said that from 2009 onwards he was raising concerns with managers. "I believe there were significant issues which promoted risk because of principally understaffing and the culture," he said. He also accuses hospital bosses of prioritizing activity, the number of patients seen and procedures performed, over patient safety. "I believe that the senior management were mostly concerned with activity rather than safety, and until safety is on a par with clinical activity, I don't see how the situation is going to be resolved," he said. And these are the heartbreaking tragedies within the UK's NHS Trust. And more than just one. And you know guys, after I came to the UK and having worked in retail, which I know is not related to the health sector, I compare obviously some things because I can see it from a different perspective and I have something to compare to, kind of like, you know, an outsider looking in, right? I've been here in the UK for over 15 years now, as I'm sure a lot of immigrants have been. What I noticed is that there is a culture and the view that everything needs to be focused on targets, on achieving a certain number, a figure on a piece of paper, which is then taken and compared with other numbers from somewhere else related to the sector. And everyone is so focused on achieving that target that they get sidetracked and they forget that at the end of the day, behind that number there is a human life, which can be negatively impacted and affected by a competition of who achieves a higher number or goes above a target set. Because on that piece of paper, the color green or blue looks 10 times better than the amber or red. And so in here, we strive to reach the green, but we are not quite happy and so we want to push ourselves to reach the blue, because we don't want to be in the amber or the red category. Those colors are bad performers. And then we have bosses who are constantly highlighting the performance and they ask for more. And then we get disheartened and we try to work even harder to push those numbers up, to show our boss that yes, we can do it. But all it does is put significant more pressure on us, our performance, and that's when we start to make mistakes. And these mistakes, depending on the sector, can be fatal to another human being. But our bosses don't care about that. All they care about is the number, because that number gives them bonuses at the end of the financial year, promotions, raises, and a pat on the back of well done. We work hard and they get praised. Why do you think that we get Employee of the Month awards with our photo next to the award, placed on the corridor of the staff room for everyone else to see? Is it because they think we did a good job and we deserve it? No, absolutely not. Not in a million years. They do it as an incentive for us to work even harder, a kind of recognition, if you will, but not for the reasons you believe, not because they appreciate you, no. It's because they want you to work even harder, thinking that you are being appreciated. You know what I mean? It's all psychological. When you see your name and photo on that wall, you are so proud of yourself. The other employees, they start envying you, and they start working harder, like in a competition, because they want their name and photo on that wall next. And you at the same time are proud of yourself because they recognize your hard work. But do they really? I'll let you decide on that. And then also another thing that I noticed is the culture of constant training, paperwork, courses, questionnaires, surveys and more. Whilst I agree at times that training, yes, is needed, courses are needed and so on and so forth, what I have realized is that common sense is being lost because of all this training and teaching and learning and paperwork and files and folders and papers, A4, A5, whatever. We stopped using common sense and we now prefer the training instead. And with this we lose values, we lose education and we lose ourselves. If you don't allow your brain to take a decision, to weigh the pros and cons of a certain situation, if you don't stimulate your brain in this way, but you instead rely on graphs and charts and numbers and colors, you will eventually lose that ability entirely and you won't have a choice but to rely on those things. Your brain is going to wither away. And as sad as it sounds, and as mean as I might sound, I think it's completely true. I don't have studies, I don't have a degree, I didn't go to university. English is my second language, which I learned in school and even from movies. I speak more languages. I learned Spanish from watching soap operas on TV in Romania with subtitles, with the subtitles being on, and I can actually speak it. I understand everything and I can have a conversation. I didn't need books or Duolingo or whatever else of an app you have today. The point I'm trying to make is, I'm not trying to sound smarter than the rest because I hardly think that's the case. All I'm trying to say is, try something out for yourself without relying on someone else or training or a course or an app and so on. When you have a question and you don't know the answer to, search it up, look it up, research it for yourself, inform yourself. Don't rely on others to give you the correct information. We are all humans and not one of us knows everything. So to rely on another human being thinking they know everything is not the way. It's not. Not to mention that all the training and the paperwork and the courses and the surveys and so on, they have been made by humans. So you will definitely find a mistake on there. We got to a stage where we don't know how to do the things that we used to know, even though we have more studies and more training. In all of this, we forgot our basic life skills, which no institution is going to teach us. Take for example, I'm just going to give you an example from my life. I had a neighbor in London, my next door neighbor, a computer technician. Yet he came knocking on my door asking if I have a tin opener. He said he's hungry, he has a tin of beans, he doesn't have a tin opener, so he can't open the tin to eat. I never in my life have used a tin opener. Yet I can open tins. I can open tins. I use a knife, and that's exactly what my husband used when he opened the tin of beans. He went down to this neighbor's flat, his girlfriend was inside, she was also a technician, and my husband took one of their knives and opened the tin in front of them, and they were just amazed. They said they never knew you can open a tin with a knife. Not trying to offend anyone, but come on. You would rather starve yourself than use your brain to come up with a solution? We have so many people with studies and degrees who have no idea how to do any basic life skills. You have social workers with university who dictate how fit of a parent you are, yet they don't even have kids, but they have studies. They have universities, degrees. There's no comparison here. It's like saying I learned my driving theory and now I can drive. But can you really drive if you've never driven a car before? No. As a surgeon with university and studies on paper, can you really perform a surgery on a patient without having hands-on practice? No, you can't. You will kill them. At this point in time, even to have a job as a cleaner, you need an NVQ. An NVQ for what? To dust? To clean toilets? To clean windows? To hoover? And so on? Isn't this something that you should already know as part of your basic life skills? Or to use a cleaning spray safely? Shouldn't you already know as an adult that a cleaning spray is harmful to you and you shouldn't spray it in your eyes or your mouth or your skin? A label needs to tell you that, and a course needs to teach you that. I don't know, guys. Talking about hospitals, I remember when I had my 5-year-old, I went to the hospital in London to deliver the baby. They put me in the maternity triage ward and I had contractions every 2 minutes and I knew I am close to having my baby. Yet the nurse told me they don't have any beds in the maternity ward, in the labor ward, and if I could hold my contractions whilst the bed becomes available. I was shocked, to say the least, when I heard that, because how would I be able to hold my contractions and not push? You have the urge. It was my second baby, so I knew how contractions felt like. I couldn't do that, so at one point I had to tell the nurse, I can't wait any longer, the baby's coming, I feel the urge to push, and eventually I was taken to a private delivery room where I had my baby. My waters didn't even break until the point I had to push the baby out. Waters broke almost in the midwife's face as I saw her having to take a few steps back, and then the baby was out. Afterwards, I was given maybe 1 or 2 hours before we got moved to a delivery room where I was meant to go before having the baby. But obviously they had no beds available. I used the bed, which was, oh my god, so uncomfortable, because I had injured I had injured just 2 years before my birth, my coccyx, and that bed was so uncomfortable and it gave me so much pain because of the pressure in my lower body, because of the delivery of the baby, that I don't know, I just had a really bad experience, if I'm honest. When I had my 12-year-old in Italy, she came unexpected and much earlier, and at the hospital they were trying to get a scan, but my contractions were very close together, and at one point the baby's head was out a bit, and I was sitting for a scan, and the nurse, or whoever it was actually, tried to push the baby's head back so she could finish the scan, but she didn't finish it because she realized I'm about to have the baby. Luckily for the baby, she was and is perfectly healthy, but I was again shocked when they pushed the baby's head back. It just goes to show that this doesn't happen only in the UK. It can happen anywhere in the world, in any hospital. As for the NHS scandal, I can guarantee you there will be even more devastating and heartbreaking stories coming to light. Victims now have a voice and they know that they will be heard. There will be even more reviews and inquiries which will find even more wrongdoings. The fact that private companies from the US outside of the UK are managing trusts doesn't make it any better. It only makes it worse because they are being driven by the dollar. Money, money, money. The money, you know, money talks, however you say it. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. Please let me know what do you think in the comment section down below. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, a thumbs up or a thumbs down, whichever way you prefer. Either way it helps me and my channel. And also, if you didn't subscribe, please consider subscribing by hitting the subscribe button. Also make sure you have your notification bell turned on so you are notified of any new videos I upload on this channel. For now, thank you so much for watching. Take care and stay safe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.